The Apache widow begged the rancher to be gentle. He hesitated. Then did the unthinkable white heavy check mark. The wind carried with it the scent of earth and grass, mixed with the faint smoke from distant fires. Among the few people who moved about the ranch that day, a tall, serious man paused for a moment, shading his eyes with one hand. He watched the figure approaching, a woman, dressed in worn clothes that had clearly seen better days, her dark hair loosely tied, and a small bundle clutched tightly in her arms. The rancher had lived in these parts for many years. He had seen travelers come and go, but something about this woman made him stop. She did not walk with the easy confidence of someone familiar with the land. Instead, every step seemed careful, almost measured, as if she were balancing fear with determination. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted to the hills and the edges of the ranch, as if expecting danger to spring up from nowhere. She reached the fence line and paused, her gaze meeting his for the first time. There was an unmistakable plea in her eyes, quiet, yet strong. The rancher did not move immediately. He had learned long ago to be cautious with strangers, especially those traveling alone. He had also learned over years of hard work and survival that appearances could be misleading. Sometimes, those who seemed weak were the most resilient, and those who seemed kind could be the cruelest. "Hello," she said softly, her voice almost trembling. I need work. I need shelter. Please." She let the sentence trail off, not wanting to sound demanding but too weary to continue speaking. She set down her bundle, which contained only a few belongings, a worn blanket, some clothes, and a small tin cup. Her hands trembled slightly and she wiped the sweat and dust from her forehead. The rancher studied her carefully. He was a man of few words, known in the area for being stern but fair. People respected him for his honesty, though some feared his temper. Now, as he looked at the woman before him, he hesitated. There was a story in her eyes, one that spoke of loss and suffering, and perhaps even danger. He did not know her name, her past, or why she had come to this remote place, but he could see the weight she carried. "Work?" he asked, his voice low and cautious. "This isn't an easy place for strangers and it's hard work. You sure you can handle it?" "I have no choice," she replied, her voice gaining a quiet strength. "I need to provide for my children. I will do anything, feed the animals, clean, cook, whatever is needed. Please, sir, I beg you to be gentle. I am not strong, but I am willing to work harder than anyone." The words hung in the air. There was a humility in her tone, yet a determination that could not be ignored. The rancher felt a pang of something he had not felt in a long time, a mix of curiosity and concern. He knew the land could be harsh. A stranger, especially a woman traveling alone, would find it unforgiving. And yet there was something in her eyes, something beyond fear, that made him consider offering her a chance. "I don't just hand out jobs to anyone," he said slowly, "and I don't guarantee safety. There are risks here. You understand that?" "I understand," she said without hesitation. "I have faced worse. I have lost more than I can bear. I only ask for a chance, for a moment of safety for work." There was a silence as the rancher weighed his options. He glanced around the ranch, imagining her working under the hot sun, carrying water, tending to the animals, and performing chores that demanded strength and endurance. He imagined her failing, getting hurt, or worse, being unable to keep up with the relentless demands of the land. And yet he could not ignore the fire in her eyes, the quiet courage that spoke louder than words. Finally, he nodded. "All right," he said, "you can stay for a while. But understand this, you must work hard. I expect honesty and you follow my rules. No excuses." "Thank you," she said softly, relief washing over her face. She picked up her bundle and followed him toward the main ranch house, careful not to stumble over the uneven ground. As they walked, she stole glances at the animals grazing in the fields and at the tools lined up neatly against the barn. She noticed the careful order, the rhythm of life on the ranch, and felt both awe and apprehension. This world was unfamiliar to her, yet she sensed that it could offer her what she had been searching for: stability, safety, and perhaps even a glimmer of hope. The rancher led her to a small cabin near the edge of the property. It was simple but clean, with a bed, a wooden table, and a small fireplace. "This is where you'll stay," he said. "Keep it tidy and you can use it as you need. Your work starts tomorrow." She nodded, setting her bundle down carefully. The cabin felt small and modest, but it was more than she had hoped for. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope. She imagined her children safe, fed, and warm, and she vowed to do everything in her power to make this place a home, however temporary it might be. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, the rancher watched her from a distance. She moved with quiet purpose, arranging her few belongings, tending to a small fire outside, and preparing a simple meal. He saw the way she carried herself, not with the arrogance of someone used to comfort, but with the dignity of someone who had endured hardship and refused to be broken. He could not help but feel a strange mix of emotions: respect, curiosity, and even a subtle sense of responsibility. He had never met anyone like her before. There was a story in her silence, a history in her eyes, and he felt an unspoken promise that life on his ranch would never be quite the same again. Night fell, and the wind whispered through the trees. The ranch was quiet, save for the occasional sound of animals settling down and the distant howl of a coyote. Inside her cabin, the widow sat by the fire, thinking of the long journey that had brought her here. She thought of the family she had lost, the dangers she had survived, and the uncertain path ahead. Yet, for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself a small measure of hope. She had reached the ranch, and despite the challenges to come, she had found a place that might offer her safety and the chance to rebuild. The rancher, meanwhile, walked back to the main house. He thought about the woman, her plea for gentleness, and the courage she had shown simply by surviving. He wondered what tomorrow would bring, what challenges would test her, and how the quiet strength she carried might influence the life of the ranch. He did not yet know the impact she would have, but he sensed that their paths had crossed for a reason, one that neither of them could yet understand. And so, as the stars began to appear in the vast night sky, the widow and the rancher each faced their own thoughts. One was full of hope and cautious determination, the other full of curiosity and unspoken respect. Both were about to embark on a journey that would challenge them, shape them, and ultimately change the course of their lives forever. The next morning, the ranch was bathed in soft, golden sunlight. Birds chirped from the trees, and the faint smell of hay and animals hung in the air. The widow woke early, her body stiff from the long journey and lack of rest. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that today would be her first day of real work. The thought of labor and responsibility did not frighten her. She welcomed it. After weeks of wandering and uncertainty, the structure and purpose of the ranch offered her a strange kind of comfort. She stepped outside her small cabin and surveyed the land. The field stretched far and wide, dotted with grazing horses and cattle. The barn loomed in the distance, and she could see the rancher already at work near the corral, his hands moving confidently as he inspected the fences. The sun had just risen, but he moved with precision, as if he had already been working for hours. The widow adjusted her clothing and tightened her grip on the small bundle of personal belongings she had brought with her. She wanted to appear capable and strong, even if her heart was filled with nervousness. She walked toward the rancher, who looked up as she approached. "Good morning," she said softly, keeping her voice calm. He nodded, his face serious. "Morning, today you start. First, you'll need to feed the animals. Get the hay from the barn and make sure the water troughs are full. After that, sweep the stables and check for any broken fences. There's a lot to do, and I expect it done properly." She nodded. "I understand. I'll do my best." He studied her for a moment. Your best needs to be better than most. This place won't forgive laziness or mistakes. Keep that in mind." "I will," she promised. With that, she moved toward the barn, her heart racing but her steps steady. The barn was filled with the sounds of animals, the lowing of cows, the neighing of horses, and the soft clucking of chickens. The widow paused for a moment, taking in the scent and sounds. She had grown up near the countryside, but never in a place as large or as organized as this ranch. The tasks ahead seemed overwhelming, but she reminded herself that she could do it, one step at a time. She began by carrying hay to the cattle, her arms straining under the weight of the bundles. She made sure each animal had enough to eat, watching their faces carefully, learning their patterns. Some cows were gentle, others impatient. She noticed how the rancher had trained them, how each fence and gate worked in harmony to keep the animals safe. As she worked, the widow realized that she had been given more than just a job. She had been given a chance to learn a new way of life, a way that required patience, care, and strength. By mid-morning, sweat covered her face and her hands were raw from handling the rough hay. She paused for a moment to rest, sitting on a small pile of straw. The rancher appeared beside her, not with anger but with observation. He watched silently as she wiped her brow and caught her breath. "You're slower than I expected," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. "But you're careful and that counts for something. Don't lose focus. If you keep this up, you might learn the land faster than I thought." She looked at him, surprised by the small compliment. "Thank you, sir. I'll try harder." He nodded and moved away, leaving her to continue. She felt a strange mix of pride and relief. Though the work was grueling, the rancher's acknowledgement gave her hope. She was beginning to feel that, despite the hardships, she could belong here, at least for now. As the day progressed, she moved from one task to another, cleaning the stables, checking fences, feeding chickens, and even assisting with milking the cows. Each task presented its own challenges. At one point, a calf tried to escape the pen, and she had to act quickly, guiding it back without injury. Another time, she accidentally spilled water near the barn entrance, causing the ground to become slippery. She caught herself before slipping but realized she had to be more careful. Every mistake was a lesson, and every success gave her confidence. The rancher observed from a distance, occasionally stepping in to correct her technique or offer guidance. He never raised his voice, but his presence was commanding. The widow learned quickly that he demanded efficiency and precision, but he also respected effort and honesty. Slowly, she began to feel a connection, not through words but through mutual understanding. Each recognized the strength and determination in the other, even though neither would openly admit it yet. By afternoon, a new tension began to arise. A group of local villagers had come to the ranch, curious about the newcomer. Whispers and sideways glances followed the widow as she worked. Some were skeptical, questioning why a woman alone would come to the ranch. Others were quietly impressed by her perseverance and dedication. The widow noticed, but she did not falter. She focused on her work, letting her actions speak louder than words. The rancher, too, noticed the attention she was receiving. A part of him felt protective, wary of gossip or misjudgment. He had seen too many strangers come and go, and he knew that appearances could mislead. He also knew that trust had to be earned, and that respect could only be gained through consistency and courage. In the widow, he saw both challenges and potential, both for the ranch and for her own life. By the time the sun began to lower in the sky, the widow had completed nearly all her tasks. She was exhausted, her muscles aching, but she also felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The rancher approached, his face unreadable as always. "You did well today," he said. "You're not perfect, but you're learning. Keep this up, and you might last here longer than I expected." She smiled faintly, the first genuine smile of the day. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." He nodded and turned away, leaving her to gather her tools and finish the day. As she worked, she reflected on how far she had come in just one day. She had faced the harsh sun, the physical labor, and the subtle judgment of the villagers, and she had survived. More than survived, she had proven to herself that she was capable of adapting, learning, and contributing. That evening, as she prepared a small meal of bread and soup, she thought about the rancher. He was stern and exacting, yet fair. He had hesitated before judging her, observed her quietly, and allowed her to prove herself. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of stability. She realized that, while the land was harsh and the work was difficult, she had found a place where she could belong, at least for now. Night fell, and the wind carried a cool breeze through the trees. The widow sat outside her cabin, looking at the stars, thinking of the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the losses she had endured, the challenges she had faced, and the uncertain future. Yet, despite everything, a small flame of hope burned within her. She had reached the ranch, found work, and earned the respect of a man known for his toughness. She knew that tomorrow would bring more challenges, more lessons, and perhaps more surprises, but she also knew that she was no longer entirely alone. The rancher, meanwhile, sat in the main house, observing from a distance. He was a man of few words, but his mind was busy. He considered the widow's determination, her strength, and the way she had handled herself throughout the day. He felt a quiet respect growing inside him, though he would not admit it. He wondered how she would adapt to the life ahead, and how her presence might affect the rhythm of the ranch, the animals, and even himself. And so, as the night grew darker and the quiet sounds of the ranch filled the air, both the widow and the rancher rested, each contemplating the day's events. One had faced the world with courage and determination, proving her worth. The other had observed, judged, and cautiously allowed a stranger into his world. Neither fully understood what the future held, but both knew that life on the ranch had changed forever. The days on the ranch passed in a steady rhythm, each one blending into the next. The widow had grown accustomed to the labor, moving through the chores with a confidence she had not felt in months. The rancher, for his part, continued to observe her, quietly impressed by her resilience and determination. Though he rarely spoke beyond necessary instructions, he began to trust her judgment and abilities. A silent bond was forming, built on mutual respect, and the unspoken understanding that they relied on each other to survive the challenges of the harsh land. One morning, as the sun rose over the distant hills, the widow noticed a change in the atmosphere. The animals were restless, a low hum of unease filling the air. Birds flew overhead, circling and calling out, their cries sharper than usual. The rancher emerged from the main house, his face tense and eyes scanning the horizon. He had seen signs of trouble before it even arrived, a skill honed from years of working with the land and its unpredictable dangers. "Something's not right," he muttered to himself, though the widow heard him. "Stay close today, keep to the barn and the main area, don't wander." The widow nodded, feeling a familiar flutter of worry in her chest. She trusted the rancher's instincts. They had proven accurate many times before. She followed his guidance, checking fences, feeding the animals, and preparing the barn for what she sensed might be coming. The rancher moved through the property with measured steps, his eyes never resting, ready to respond to any threat. By mid-morning, a distant commotion began to make itself heard. The sound of hooves pounding against the ground carried across the fields, growing louder with each passing minute. The widow's heart raced as she realized that someone, or something, was approaching fast. A group of travelers emerged over the hill, dust rising around them. Their intentions were unclear, and the rancher's hand instinctively went to the rifle resting by the barn. The widow stayed calm, remembering the rancher's earlier advice. She had learned to observe, to anticipate, and to act carefully under pressure. She watched as the rancher stepped forward, his voice firm and commanding. "Who goes there?" he called out. The travelers slowed, raising their hands to show they meant no harm. But the widow noticed the tension in their posture, the wary glances exchanged among them. There was uncertainty, and perhaps fear on both sides. As they approached closer, one of them spoke, explaining that their wagon had broken down nearby and they were seeking temporary shelter and assistance. They were travelers like her, vulnerable to the dangers of the open land. The rancher considered their words carefully. He could not risk the safety of his animals or his property, but he also understood what it meant to be in need. After a tense moment, he allowed them to rest near the edge of the ranch, giving them basic supplies and water. The widow observed quietly, admiring the way he balanced caution with compassion. She felt a deep sense of understanding. Here was a man shaped by the land, who knew the value of mercy even when the world was harsh. As the day progressed, the widow returned to her chores, but a new unease had settled over her. She could not shake the feeling that this day would bring more than just tired muscle and dust-covered clothes. Her instincts, sharpened by months of survival, warned her that challenges were on the horizon, and that she and the rancher would soon face a test unlike any they had encountered before. Late in the afternoon, the crisis arrived. A fire broke out in a nearby field, likely sparked by the dry heat and a stray ember from the travelers' camp. The flames spread quickly, fueled by the dry grass and strong wind. The rancher shouted orders, his voice cutting through the crackling of the fire. "Bring the water." "Herd the animals to the west pasture. Move quickly." The widow moved without hesitation, carrying buckets of water, guiding frightened animals, and helping the travelers understand what to do. Her hands burned from the effort, and her clothes were covered in ash, but she did not stop. Every instinct she had learned in her difficult life came into play. She worked alongside the rancher, matching his pace and determination. At one point, a frightened horse bolted toward the flames, and the widow ran after it. She caught its bridle just in time, holding it steady until the rancher arrived to assist her. His eyes met hers for a brief moment, a flicker of acknowledgement passing between them. They had worked together seamlessly, their efforts combined to protect the animals and prevent the fire from spreading further. Despite their hard work, the fire grew in intensity. Thick smoke filled the air, making it hard to breathe. The widow coughed, her eyes stinging, but she refused to give in to fear. She reminded herself of her children and the promise she had made to survive for them. She would not fail, not today. The rancher, for his part, demonstrated a surprising flexibility and courage. He took risks to contain the fire, moving closer to the flames than he normally would. He guided the animals to safety, ensured the travelers were protected, and constantly checked on the widow, silently urging her to stay strong. It was during these moments that she began to see him in a new light, not just as a stern and distant man, but as someone capable of empathy, courage, and selflessness. Hours passed, and the fire was finally under control. The land was scorched in places, and the air still carried the smell of smoke, but the animals were safe, and the ranch itself had avoided serious damage. Exhausted and covered in soot, the widow sat down on a wooden crate, her heart still racing. The rancher approached her, his expression unreadable but softer than usual. "You did well today," he said simply. "You kept your head and worked hard. You didn't falter, and that saved more than one life." The widow looked up at him, surprise and gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't have done it without your guidance." He nodded, though he did not offer more words. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, a recognition of each other's strength and courage. The crisis had tested them both, and they had risen to the challenge together. This moment would remain etched in their memories, a turning point that would change the way they saw each other and the world around them. As night fell, the ranch was quiet once more. The stars shone brightly in the sky, and the air, though still tinged with smoke, carried a sense of calm. The widow returned to her cabin, exhausted but filled with a new sense of confidence. She had faced danger, acted with courage, and survived. She realized that life on the ranch, though demanding, could also bring opportunities to grow, to prove oneself, and to find unexpected allies. The rancher, meanwhile, sat on the porch of the main house, reflecting on the day's events. He thought about the widow, about the way she had handled herself under pressure, and about the silent strength she carried. He felt a rare sense of admiration, not just for her work but for her character. In the harsh world they both inhabited, finding someone who could meet challenges with courage and integrity was rare indeed. Over the following days, the ranch slowly returned to routine. The widow continued her work, now with even more determination. The fire had left scars on the land, but it had also revealed the strength and resilience of those who lived and worked there. The rancher began to trust her more, allowing her greater responsibility and independence. She was no longer just a new worker. She was becoming an essential part of the ranch's daily life. At the same time, the villagers' whispers continued. Some admired the widow's courage during the fire, while others remained skeptical, questioning how long she could endure the harsh realities of ranch life. The widow, however, paid them little attention. She had faced judgment, danger, and hardship before, and she knew that her actions, not words, would define her. The turning point of the fire left a lasting impression on both the widow and the rancher. They had faced a trial together, and though neither admitted it openly, they had come to rely on each other. The widow realized that courage and determination could earn respect, even in the most unlikely circumstances. The rancher realized that compassion and observation could reveal hidden strengths in others. By the time the sun set on the third day after the fire, both were aware that life on the ranch would never be the same. They had passed a test that measured not only their abilities, but also their character. The widow had proven herself capable, and the rancher had shown that even a man known for sternness could recognize and nurture potential. As they prepared for the evening, the widow paused to look at the rancher. "Thank you," she said softly, though this time it was more than a simple courtesy. "For trusting me, for helping me, for letting me be here." He nodded, his face still guarded but softer than before. "You've earned it," he replied simply. And in that quiet moment under the deepening sky, both felt the subtle shift in their relationship. It was no longer just employer and worker, or stranger and stranger. They had become allies, partners in survival, bound by courage, respect, and the shared understanding that life could be harsh. But together, they could face it. The days after the fire passed in a tense but steady rhythm. The ranch slowly returned to its normal routines, yet both the widow and the rancher felt a lingering sense that something was about to change. The air was warmer now, the fields recovering from the scorched patches, and the animals seemed calmer, almost sensing that life had been tested and survived. Still, neither could ignore the subtle tension that hovered over the ranch. The events of the fire had revealed more than just courage. They had revealed hearts and character, bonds and weaknesses. One morning, as the sun barely touched the horizon, the widow noticed a movement at the edge of the property. A small group of men, rough-looking and serious, had appeared over the distant hill. They were strangers, their intentions unclear. Panic threatened to rise in her chest as she ran toward the main house, seeking the rancher. He was already outside, scanning the horizon, his hand resting lightly on the rifle that never left his side. His eyes, sharp and calculating, took in the situation instantly. "They're here for something," he muttered, his voice low but firm. "Stay back." The widow obeyed, her heart racing. She could see the determination in the strangers' faces, the way they moved with purpose. She knew, from years of surviving harsh realities, that people who approached like this often meant trouble. The rancher, sensing her fear, placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "I won't let anything happen to you. Stay close and do exactly as I say." Time seemed to stretch as the strangers advanced toward the ranch. The rancher's mind worked quickly, calculating risks, escape routes, and defenses. He gave precise instructions to the widow: keep the children and animals in the cabin, remain calm, and don't make a sound unless he signals. She nodded, trusting him completely, though every muscle in her body was tense with fear. The strangers reached the edge of the ranch and called out. Their voices were harsh, demanding, and filled with authority. They demanded that the rancher surrender supplies, animals, and any valuables he had. It was clear they expected obedience, assuming the isolated rancher would comply without question. But he was not a man to yield easily, nor one to abandon the vulnerable people who depended on him. "You don't know what you're asking," he said, his voice steady but firm. "You will leave this place now, or you will face consequences you do not expect." The strangers laughed, their voices carrying a cruel edge. They believed him to be alone, perhaps inexperienced, and they underestimated both his strength and the hidden resources of the ranch. The widow, hidden behind the cabin door, held her children close. She watched, her breath caught in her throat, as the tension escalated. She knew that the rancher had prepared for such moments, but she could not shake the fear that this might be the moment everything fell apart. Suddenly, the leader of the strangers stepped forward, brandishing a weapon and demanding compliance. The rancher hesitated, not out of fear but out of calculation. He had to make a choice, one that required both courage and an understanding of human nature. His eyes flicked briefly toward the widow and the children. Their safety depended on his next move. Then, in a decision that seemed impossible to anyone watching, he acted. He moved forward with calm precision, not in anger but in strategy. With a commanding voice, he created a diversion, drawing the strangers' attention away from the cabin. Using his knowledge of the land and the ranch's layout, he positioned himself between the intruders and the vulnerable people under his protection. It was a move that required both bravery and careful planning, an unthinkable risk, yet one that left no room for hesitation. The widow watched in awe and fear as the rancher maneuvered with skill and confidence. He used the terrain to his advantage, guiding the strangers away from the cabin and toward a narrow passage between two hills. There, he blocked their path with clever traps and obstacles he had prepared for emergencies, ensuring that they could not advance without exposing themselves to risk. The strangers, frustrated and unsure, found themselves caught in a situation they had not anticipated. The rancher then stepped forward again, his voice carrying authority and resolve. "Leave this place. Now. You will not harm anyone and you will take nothing. This is your only warning." The leader of the strangers hesitated, clearly underestimating the rancher's determination. The widow's heart pounded as she watched the standoff, unsure of what would happen next. Yet in that moment, she realized something important. The rancher was not just a stern man of action, but someone guided by a deep sense of responsibility and humanity. His actions were risky, yes, but they were driven by a desire to protect the innocent and to uphold justice in a world that often lacked it. For a tense few minutes, the strangers argued among themselves, their voices raised in frustration and fear. They had not expected such courage or clever strategy, and they were beginning to understand that the rancher was not a man they could intimidate easily. Slowly, they began to retreat, realizing that further confrontation would be dangerous. The widow felt a surge of relief as they moved back over the hill, leaving the ranch in peace once more. The rancher returned to the cabin, his face serious but calm. The widow ran to him, her children clinging to her skirts. You did it," she said, her voice trembling. "You saved us." He nodded quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We were lucky," he said, "and careful. Courage alone isn't enough. You have to think, plan, and act. Never forget that." The widow looked at him, a mixture of admiration and gratitude in her eyes. She realized that the rancher had done something unthinkable, not out of recklessness but out of compassion, responsibility, and courage. He had risked his safety to protect others, and in doing so, he had revealed a side of himself that few people ever saw. In the days that followed, the events of that day became a quiet legend on the ranch. The widow continued her work, now with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that life was unpredictable, that danger could arrive without warning, but she also knew that courage and careful action could overcome even the most threatening situations. The rancher, meanwhile, continued to observe her, noticing the growing confidence and calm she displayed. She had faced fear and danger, and she had learned to trust not only herself, but also the guidance and support of someone who had become a protector and ally. Their relationship deepened, not through words, but through shared experience and unspoken understanding. The widow realized that trust and respect could grow even in the harshest of circumstances. The rancher realized that courage and determination could be found in unexpected places, and that allowing someone to prove themselves could reveal strengths that were hidden beneath appearances. Even the villagers, who had once whispered doubt and suspicion, began to see the widow differently. Her actions during the confrontation demonstrated not only her bravery, but also her reliability and calm under pressure. She was no longer just a stranger at the ranch. She had become a respected member of the community, someone whose presence carried both dignity and strength. As the sun set on the ranch, casting long shadows across the fields, the widow and the rancher sat together for a brief moment of quiet reflection. The land around them was peaceful once more, yet both knew that life here would always carry challenges. They had faced one of the greatest tests yet, and they had survived not just because of skill, but because of courage, trust, and the willingness to act in the face of fear. The rancher looked at the widow, a rare softness in his expression. "You've proven yourself," he said simply. "Not just in work but in character. You've earned a place here." The widow smiled faintly, feeling a sense of accomplishment and gratitude she had not felt in a long time. "And you've shown me what courage and responsibility really mean," she replied. In that quiet moment, both understood that life on the ranch had changed forever. The unthinkable action of the rancher had not only saved lives, but had also forged a bond of trust, respect, and shared experience that would shape the future for both of them. It was a turning point that neither would forget, a moment when courage, compassion, and intelligence combined to overcome fear, danger, and uncertainty. As night fell and stars twinkled above the wide-open land, the rancher returned to the main house, and the widow tended to her small cabin. Both were exhausted, yet both were filled with a sense of accomplishment and connection. The fire had tested them, the strangers had challenged them, and now they had proven that together they could face even the most unthinkable circumstances. Life on the ranch would continue, but the events of that day remained in their hearts and minds. The widow had discovered courage and resilience she had not known she possessed, and the rancher had revealed compassion and strategic bravery few had seen. Together, they had faced a crisis and emerged stronger, their bond forged in the heat of danger and the unthinkable choices that had protected the innocent and preserved life. The days following the confrontation were quieter, but they carried a sense of renewal. The widow and the rancher had survived the unthinkable, and life on the ranch began to settle into a new rhythm. The fields, though still recovering from the scars of fire and struggle, were alive again with grazing animals and the soft hum of nature. The wind carried the familiar sense of grass and earth, a gentle reminder that life, no matter how harsh, always continued. The widow woke early, as she had every day, but this morning there was a different feeling in the air. She moved with purpose, tending to the animals and preparing her small cabin. Her hands were skilled now, her movements confident. Each task was done with care, not just out of necessity but with pride. She felt stronger, not just physically but in her heart and mind. The experiences she had endured, the fire, the strangers, the endless labor, had shaped her into someone resilient and capable. The rancher observed her from a distance, his expression as steady as ever, though a faint softness had begun to emerge in his eyes when he watched her work. He had seen many people come and go in his life, but the widow was different. She had faced danger and fear, yet she had risen to the challenge. Her courage, intelligence, and determination had earned his respect, and over time, something more had grown, a quiet admiration and a deep sense of trust. "Morning," he said as he approached, his voice low but warm. "Good morning," she replied, smiling faintly. Her eyes reflected the exhaustion of hard work but also a quiet joy she had not felt in a long time. The rancher nodded toward the animals. "They're doing well. You've kept things in order. I'll be honest, without your help, yesterday could have gone very differently." The widow's heart lifted. "Thank you. I only did what I had to. I couldn't stand by while danger threatened this place or the people here." He studied her for a moment, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You've proven more than that. You've proven that strength isn't just about muscles or weapons. It's about courage, patience, and heart. That's something many people never learn." As the day unfolded, the widow continued her chores with efficiency and calm. She moved through the barn and fields, guiding animals, checking fences, and tending to the crops. Her confidence had grown, and with it, her sense of belonging. For the first time in months, she felt that she had a place where she could truly contribute, a place where her work mattered. The rancher moved beside her occasionally, offering advice or quietly observing her methods. Their partnership had deepened beyond employer and worker. There was now a silent understanding between them, a trust forged in fire and danger, and a respect that neither needed to speak aloud. The widow realized that she no longer felt like an outsider. She was part of the ranch, part of a team, and part of a story that was still unfolding. The villagers who had once whispered doubts and questions now looked at the widow with admiration. Her bravery during the confrontation with the strangers had become a quiet legend, and her continued hard work only reinforced the impression that she was capable, resilient, and honorable. People began to treat her not just as a newcomer but as a respected member of the community. Some offered help, while others sought advice or guidance. She was slowly building a network of support, a family of sorts, beyond the ranch itself. Even the children, who had hidden in the cabin during the confrontation, began to emerge with cautious curiosity. The widow watched them play near the edge of the barn, their laughter a soft reminder of what she had been protecting all along. She felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that her efforts had kept them safe, and that their world, though small, could be a place of joy and learning despite the hardships around them. As the weeks passed, the widow and the rancher faced smaller challenges, weather changes, minor accidents with animals, and the ongoing work of maintaining the ranch. But these were nothing compared to the dangers they had overcome together. Each challenge was met with teamwork, skill, and trust. The widow grew stronger, her abilities sharper, and her confidence in herself, and the rancher's guidance deepened. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the widow prepared a simple meal outside her cabin. The rancher joined her, carrying a small basket of supplies. They ate in silence for a while, watching the golden light stretch across the fields. There was a peace in the moment, a calm that seemed to settle over them after so many days of tension and uncertainty. "You've come a long way," the rancher said finally, breaking the silence. His voice carried a quiet pride. "I have," she replied softly, "but it's not just me. You've guided me, trusted me, and allowed me to prove myself. I couldn't have done it alone." He nodded, his gaze steady. "Life is about more than just surviving. It's about learning, growing, and standing up when it matters. You've shown me that strength can come in many forms and that courage isn't just about facing danger. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard." The widow looked at him, understanding the depth of his words. She realized that the bond between them had transformed into something meaningful, a connection built on trust, shared experience, and respect. They had faced life's harsh realities together, and through that, they had discovered not just strength but hope. As night fell, the ranch was quiet. The animals rested, the wind whispered through the trees, and the stars shone brightly above. The widow stood outside her cabin, looking up at the sky. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, the losses, the hardships, and the moments of fear and uncertainty. But she also thought of the courage she had discovered in herself, the guidance of the rancher, and the new life she had begun to build. In her heart, she felt a sense of gratitude that was deeper than she had ever known. The ranch had become more than a place to work. It was a sanctuary, a home, and a place where she could continue to grow, protect her children, and contribute to something larger than herself. She realized that even in a world filled with hardship, it was possible to find hope, safety, and a sense of belonging. The rancher, too, reflected on the changes that had occurred. He had always been a man of few words, but the events of the past weeks had shifted something within him. He had faced challenges that required not just strength, but wisdom, patience, and compassion. And in the widow, he had discovered someone whose courage and determination inspired him, someone who reminded him that even in a harsh world, kindness and bravery could make a difference. Together, they continued to work on the ranch, their lives intertwined by experience, trust, and mutual respect. The widow's presence brought new energy and purpose, while the rancher's guidance provided structure and protection. The challenges of the land remained, but they faced them together, stronger and wiser than before. Over time, the widow began to teach her children the skills she had learned on the ranch, how to care for animals, tend the fields, and navigate the land safely. She shared with them the lessons of courage, patience, and resilience, hoping to instill in them the same strength that had carried her through the hardest times. The rancher supported her efforts quietly, offering advice when needed and observing the growth of both mother and children with pride. The community around the ranch also began to recognize the widow's transformation. People sought her guidance, admired her resilience, and offered friendship. She was no longer just a newcomer or a stranger. She was a valued member of the community, someone whose experiences and strength inspired others. As the seasons changed, the ranch continued to flourish. The widow and the rancher worked side by side, their partnership steady and unspoken but deeply understood. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and hardship, and had emerged stronger, their bond forged in shared trials and mutual respect. The land, once harsh and unforgiving, now felt like a place of growth, opportunity, and hope. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the fields, the widow turned to the rancher. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with quiet emotion, "for everything. For trusting me, guiding me, and showing me that life can be more than just survival." The rancher nodded, a rare softness in his expression. "You've earned every bit of it," he replied, "and you've shown me that courage and heart can make all the difference. Life is hard, but it's also full of possibilities. You've reminded me of that." In that moment, under the vast, starlit sky, both felt a sense of completion and hope. The challenges they had faced, the dangers they had survived, and the courage they had discovered within themselves had transformed their lives. They had built something enduring, a bond of trust, respect, and understanding that would carry them forward, no matter what the future held. The widow smiled, feeling a peace she had not known in a long time. She looked at the rancher, her children playing quietly nearby, and the land stretching endlessly before them. In the quiet of the evening, she realized that they had not only survived the harshness of the world, they had thrived within it together. And so life continued on the ranch, filled with work, learning, and quiet moments of reflection. The widow had found strength, safety, and a place to belong. The rancher had discovered trust, respect, and the courage to act with compassion. Together, they faced each day with resilience and hope, proving that even in the harshest of circumstances, humanity, courage, and kindness could prevail. The story of the widow and the rancher became a quiet legend, a tale of survival, courage, and the unthinkable acts that could change lives. It was a story of transformation, a testament to the power of hope, and a reminder that even in the most difficult times, life could offer new beginnings and the chance to build something enduring. And as the stars shone over the ranch, the widow, her children, and the rancher knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they had found strength in each other, hope in their shared efforts, and a future that promised growth, safety, and the enduring power of courage.